My hands stable, I feel able to turn the tables, I could do this. Just keep moving, keep your hands up, stupid. I feel lucid, a new viewing. I can see the end, I can see my future, I can view it. It's right there for the taking. Everything I've ever wanted, dreams are just waiting. I just gotta fight for it, willing to die for it, willing to like sort of.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000, it still sucks. This is Philip J. Price, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show, your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe, you know what to do, just like every other podcast.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Alongside with me is Big Blue. How you doing, Big Blue? I like the choice of shirt there.
I know it's my Drunk Turkey shirt.
Coming in clutch, my man. Coming in clutch, and in the perfect color as well. So we had a members only live last night. That was pretty fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Me too. I actually had to get a chance to have a drink last night, but not tonight. I have to work tonight, but hey, you can't have fun every day.
Right. That would be a problem. But so today what we're going to talk about basically is we wanted to discuss how Bryan Kohberger, who's been, charged with the quadruple homicide of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. Wait, did I say her already?
No, you haven't said.
Okay, I thought I said it twice. My bad. I apologize. He's been charged, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the time frame in which the incident occurred, which is November 13, 2022, and the time in which where he was arrested, which was December 30th of 2022 in the morning hours. And we're going to try to figure out what happened. Why did it take so long for law enforcement to arrest him? A lot of people thought at certain points that maybe perhaps he had help, or maybe perhaps law enforcement knew who he was for a while. There's a lot of theories. Let's kind of, just talk it out. What do you think, Big Blue?
I mean, I think for some people it might be a long time, but for others, I mean, it was not as long as other cases. Look at the Delphi, or look at the Long Island. How many years did it take to capture him? But they didn't have as much information on him as they did, I guess, on Bryan once they got that DNA back. So it depends on how they build the case. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I completely understand. So let's what Kohberger did allegedly to avoid or elude enforcement. Hold on one second. We got a super chat. We got a $5 super chat from Angel D. She says, I need to ask, did law enforcement have none of BK DNA from his Washington apartment or his office at WSU? Only it was at the button snap. Well, by the time that they checked his apartment, that was after his arrest. So all they had at the moment was just the DNA on the button sheath. Once they got the connection, they went and arrested him. After his arrest, they got the search warrant to check his office, his apartment, things of that nature. Oh man, I can't take it off the screen. You're gonna have to do it for me, Blue.
Already.
Thank you. So the first things first was, this guy committed this crime, right? That by all accounts he almost got away with it, right? In my opinion, had it not been for the knife sheath, I think he would have. Blue, what are your thoughts? If he would have kept the knife sheath, do you think that, or had he not left the knife sheath, that's a better way of saying it, and not left it, do you think that he would be in custody today, or do you think this would still be an unsolved quadruple homicide?
I would say they would probably be investigating him, but to put him in behind bars under you know, of being accused of the crime, I would say they would have a lot more work to do because
Right.
eventually they were going to see that white car in the cameras. Eventually they
Right.
would, connect at least those dots, but connecting the, the amount of times he was there with his cell phone, connecting all that probably wouldn't have been done because it probably wouldn't have had enough evidence to get a search warrant for it. I think because a white
Right.
car, you can't see the plates, so they would still be
Right.
looking for a
Well,
white car.
here's the thing about the white car. How were they going to that car was to Kohberger? Because he didn't go straight home right after the incident. If he committed as he is accused, he did this weird route and got him home at around 5:30 in the morning. So that tells me that, well, one, when I read that and I figured that, why he would have taken that route, that was one to elude or aid the investigation. Because if I was investigating this case, and I've never been an investigator, I've never been a detective, I'm none of those things now, but just, speculatory and hypothetically, if I was investigating this crime, right, what are the first things that I'm going to go and look for, right? I'm going to go and look at the surveillance and try to determine, based on, time frame of a vehicle, maybe perhaps in the area during the time in which it has been eluded, that this crime had been. You have two victims that are stating, or one saying that she woke up. She probably says she woke up around 4:00 and she looked at her phone. They did a forensic download. They probably were able to determine that her phone went from, not being active to on or active at a certain time, right? You have that information. You have her statement at that point. You're going to kind of get an idea that this incident happened around, 3:45, 4:15 in the morning. So you try to get surveillance in the nearby places and you find that you're going to see this car. You see which direction that it leaves, right? Now, my assumption, and I'm sure investigators are probably going to change the way they do things nowadays. Kohberger is going to change the way investigators investigate people. Yeah, that's for sure. I would have looked at, all right, if this white vehicle left town, right, I'm going to look at the nearby cities in which, the direct period that he went. You would have had, Blaine, Idaho. You would have had Pullman, Washington. You would have had in Genesee. You would have had all these other towns south and towards east and west, right? So I would have thought to myself, all right, well, if he went to Pullman, that's probably a 12, maybe 25-minute drive, that you're expecting this car to pull in. And so you're looking for that time frame. And, you're having a bunch of tips. You have to remember that this isn't like, all right, we have all day, all night, like a cold case where, the task force is small and they, can go through every piece of evidence. There's a lot of stuff coming in, right? And so you look at that specific time frame, you don't see a white Elantra, you move on. You move on to the next one, you don't see a white Elantra, you move on. You move on to the next one. And then you start thinking to yourself, well, if I'm not finding this vehicle, entering any of these cities, then the probability is that it's still in the city, right?
Yeah, and that's how I know that for a fact that they did do some investigation just off the car because they didn't have the DNA results right away. So they were looking already for a white car. So that means they had got picked up on some cameras. So that was one thing that I would say that they already had that in their book, that they were looking for that. Now, the other thing that I see that, and a lot of other places, but I didn't see done there, is we don't know where he parked, right? But if he parked somewhere by the house, it looks like it's a gravel road. I don't know if they took tire tracks, moldings. And if they did, they can match it to his tire tracks in his car, which I haven't heard anything of that. That's another thing that they probably would have gone down if they were But if they didn't do it right away, then they would miss it. You know what I mean? They would have way too many tire tracks by the time anything else came up, because a lot of news people, students, and people were driving by the scene to see what's going on. It's like in anywhere else, something happens. There's a nosy neighbor, Karen, looking at it, seeing what's going on.
Well, I mean, isn't that the reason why you maybe perhaps target this area? We have to, when they said that this house was, this place was targeted, or this was a targeted event, that it could have been one of the victims or the roommates, or it could have been the house. If the goal is to commit this high profile crime, right? And that's the goal, commit a unsolved high profile, and you want to get away with this crime, you're going to choose a high area, and the reason being is you're going to have multiple tire tracks. We've seen how many cars parked back there. This was, unfortunately, if you look at it from the eyes of somebody trying to commit a crime, this house, the way it was situated, how many people entered, how many people exited that house, the parties, the amount of traffic that was outside, not just from that house, but from the apartment complex next door. They were driving in front of there, any
the back,
parties and stuff.
The back
Right.
of the house was a parking lot for the school and for the apartments.
Exactly. So, the amount of stuff that was going through there, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to separate which tire tracks are the suspects and which ones are and just anybody else through there. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Glenna asked, do you think the sheath puts him in the house? Yes, I do.
Yeah, there was I would say that is, somebody put that the worst house he could have picked. Yeah, I think there would have been a lot more better houses he could have picked. That was a really populated area. A lot of cameras.
Here's the thing, though, Dinky. It was an awfully quiet night. He was a criminologist, a PhD student, a teacher's assistant as well. Now, those in his group or in his, I'd say group, yeah, those in his group perhaps are interns, Pullman Police Department or in Moscow Police Department. And maybe perhaps they were aware that there was going to be that force that was out there that night that was going, or he was aware that there was a task force that night. And that's the reason why he chose that night. There was a lot of obstacles that night. There was a hit and run that occurred right in front of his apartment complex. There was a new vehicle parked in, at the house. Right. But he chose that night specifically. And maybe it's because he knew that night there was going to be this underage drinking course, which is not effectively designated to stop parties, but is a result, but the parties being stopped as a result of it. If you have police in the area and carding people, you're not going to have a party. Right. Thank you, Challenge Daily, for $5 super sticker. We appreciate that. What did you bring up, Blue? I'm sorry. Angel Lee comes in with it too. It wasn't a dumb question. It wasn't at all. Sometimes, I even the timeline of things. You just gotta refresh our memory sometimes. But I appreciate your question.
Thank you, guys.
Diana says, don't you think that what woke Dylan made her think Kaylee was playing was Murphy? In fact, the dog was barking. It's possible. She doesn't say that the dog was barking, but we do know that at 4:17 the dog barks. I find it difficult to believe that if the dog was barking and it was and Kohberger was starting off in the third floor at 4:17, that he would have been able to have committed the crime and gotten out of there. I strongly suspect he had a change of clothing My speculation and my theory is that he had a change of clothing, and that to get changed, get in his car, and secure all his evidence, get in his car, and get going. For me, I feel like that's not time, because he was seen at 4:20, so that would have been 3 minutes to do everything. 8 minutes, 10 minutes, that's more logical. I think he was there between 4:08 and 4:19, so that's about 11 minutes. And I think that everything that did occur is highly plausible in that amount of time. Thank you, Julie, for your $9.99 super sticker. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go. We got to put up the disclaimer. Let's see. And so if Kohberger, committed this crime, and the goal or the option, like as I mentioned before, was to get away with this high profile crime, right? Whether it's to embarrass local law enforcement, the university, everybody, right? Because he's been going through a bunch of crap, right? He's getting, he was having problems as a teacher's assistant. He had, he was having problems with other students. There was PhD students who created a tally that they called the Bryan tally, according to certain podcasts, and that they marked off when Kohberger was, being condescending, when he was being aggressive, or mistreating female students or classmates or professors. And so he had all these things going on. And so whether that all ties in to everything, I think it kind of, there's a lot of it that goes into it. Well, anyways, so if he decides, hey, we gotta, he's going to commit this perfect, high profile crime, he needs to find the house that's perfect for him, which is how the house is targeted. And we kind of went through that. Why a lot of people, female residents who are young and attractive, that adds to a high profile crime. Those high profile crimes, correct me if I'm wrong, it's usually a young attractive victim, multiple victims, things like that. And so those things are kind of one of the reasons why I think that. And also those text messages that he had with his buddy around the time he was being a teacher's assistant, where he said that he wanted to be a detective solving high profile crimes. So I don't find that to be, just a coincidence, in my opinion. That's one thing. And then he's literally saying that in his text message. You know what I mean? It kind of almost. Go ahead.
I said, when you're done, I'm going to answer the question. But I threw it.
What's the question?
Do
you think Kohberger was
hyped on drugs or something else that night of the murder? I don't think so. But the way he was acting irrationally and stuff like that makes it look like he was maybe starting drugs again. But I mean, that's really simple to test. They would do a hair follicle test. It should be able to go back for about a year. He's got long hair. They can find him not bald, and then shave his hair bald. So, well, see, I doubt they do it.
I don't think they can, because that's not going to pinpoint exactly. Like, that's not going to say that he was on narcotics that night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
$20 super chat.
Thank you, Carmela. We appreciate that. I really like you guys, but man, in my opinion, you guys are way off on this one. We appreciate the love, and we could be. I doubt it. Kohberger's been arrested for a reason, and we're just kind of following, the evidence that's been portrayed. So we could be wrong. We're open to anything that kind of says differently. If you have a different theory, throw it out there. And, we've had a lot of people come up, and I think for the most part, we've been able to debunk most of them. What do you think, Blue?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're only going by the facts that we know. We don't know all the facts that the defense has or the prosecution has. Maybe we are wrong, but we don't know until he gets tried and a jury finds him guilty or not guilty. And then we'll find out.
Or evidence comes out. Like, I thought it was pretty clear and straightforward in the Richard Allen case in Delphi. And
Yeah.
I don't think that anymore. I'm not saying that it wasn't that scenario or that he's not involved. I strongly suspect that Richard Allen was involved. But I think there's a possibility that there's way more to that story, which could include a possibility that Richard Allen wasn't involved. So I don't know. I need to see what the prosecution is going to say in that case and how they present their case. And I just know the defense is really raising some eyebrows in that case. And in that case, we're covering as well. But yeah, we might be wrong. We might not. But, for me, it just kind of makes the most sense. Like, if you had a vehicle parked that you had never seen, and the optimum goal here is not to get caught, you would have to have the situation. Having a vehicle you've never seen, you don't know who's there, or having 6 vehicles parked outside, that doesn't seem like the perfect scenario. What do you think? Do you think that that's like that lines up in that instance?
No, I don't think it lines up. I mean, to me, it's like I've always wondered: is you're supposed to be so smart and bright, but you still took your own vehicle.
Oh, dude.
I know what happens.
I'm going to get into that one with you, because I think that taking somebody else's vehicle is by far the dumbest thing anybody could do. I don't understand.
If I was to plan this, I wouldn't take a vehicle.
Okay, well, there's so many things that are out there. You live 10 miles away. You're going to get spotted somewhere walking on a bicycle. You took your vehicle and parked it somewhere else. You're going to still be seen on camera walking in a certain direction, on ring cameras and things of that nature. So there's still the possibility of getting caught. Now, when it comes to the taking somebody else's car, whose car are you going to take, Blue?
I'm going to take... I wouldn't talk about another car. Like, if I would have planned this out right, I would have taken maybe like an Uber to a different part of town, close to, not to the house, but close to the house, maybe a mile or 2 away, hours ahead of time. Maybe gone to, somewhere you can hide for a while, and then you walk the rest of the way.
All right.
You have less chances of getting caught on the camera.
How are you getting home?
Same thing. You have to make the walk back, the 10-mile walk back.
And nobody's gonna see you covered in, you just committed a quadruple homicide, walking on the side of the highway, muddy and bloody. That would probably be the description of you off the side of the road there. So
there's a lot of wooded areas. I'm pretty sure there's not houses everywhere, but there in that area there's houses everywhere.
You're new to the area. It's super dark out there. You can't see jack. You're really gonna go off into the woods, or?
Well, you pre-plan this. You would kind of have. I would say you'd have a path already built somewhere.
I'll have a path built somewhere. All right. I mean, it's a possibility. That's a possibility. What's another way? Who else's car would you take? Would you take a friend's car? Now, you got to remember, Bryan Kohberger is new to the area. He probably doesn't have very many friends. And the people that he's probably associated with out there by probably his job and or his school, criminology students, probably in the PhD program or law program. And these guys are wanting to catch people, or they want to, they want to catch people. They're doing criminology. They want to arrest, suspects that are doing criminal offenses. So you're gonna borrow one of their cars, Blue?
No, not one of theirs. No.
You don't think they're gonna narc?
I wouldn't borrow one of their cars. I would do like.
Would you rent a car?
a tour rental or something, but you know,
A rental?
and like I said, I wouldn't park it close to the place. Like the tour rentals, the ones you rent per day from online from people.
Oh yeah. I think there would be some sort of account of that. And here's the thing though. Even if you rent one of those and you walk back to it and you're covered in blood, right? You get into this vehicle, you go and you turn it back in, even if you clean it or whatever. That person's not going to be like, hey, you know, somebody messed up my car. You know, there's a little bit of mud in here. They walked 2 miles through the forest, so there's got.
Yeah, you take the,
you know what I mean?
bag of clothes, the booties. I think it's possible, man. I think it's possible.
Oh yeah, yeah. How long do you think it'll take to walk 10 miles, or the 2 miles away?
10 miles for an average runner like him. If he was a runner, I would say it'd probably take him 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Now you think that would be this? Oh, he's got a backpack on. He's got all the tools.
Be the smartest thing. He'd be exhausted. You know, he'd be tired after what he did, and then trying to run. I get it, but like I said, I wouldn't run the whole 10 miles. I'd park somewhere.
What about stealing a car? What about stealing a car? Do you think that's smart? You think that's smarter than taking your own vehicle, making your vehicle?
Not in a small town. Not in a small town.
Well, I mean, in any town. Here's the thing. You now created another but by stealing a car, you've now committed a second crime that you were going to try to get away with. So now, not only are you trying to get away with a quadruple murder, but you're also trying to get away with stealing the car. You have different, you know, detectives investigating you, one for theft, one for the quadruple homicide, and you think that with this much, you know, investigating going up against, you know, to the same person, that they're not going to come across it.
Well, it's like what's going on. I think I just saw the story. It's been happening in Atlanta, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know it's a group of kids, and it's typically 3. They'll steal a car, and they'll run up behind you and they'll bump you.
Mm-hmm.
And right when you pull over, say, "Hey, we crashed," whatever, they carjack you.
Mm-hmm.
And they take whatever money you have and they take your car. And that's how easy it is for they can do it in big cities, and they do it all the time. And I think it was in Atlanta. They had already like 5 or 6 incidents where they came and caught these guys, and there's 3 of them in one car, and they keep stealing cars and they keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's
it's called the Kia Boys, yeah, because they normally steal the Kias or the Hondas because they're easy to steal with, you know, the USB.
Right. I'm not saying that there isn't the possibility of stealing, but there'd also be reports of that. You know, somebody not going to come forward and say my vehicle is stolen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, you know, to me, especially in a small town like that, in a desolate area, rural area, it just doesn't make any sense that that's the smart decision to do there in that situation. I think the smartest decision would be to cover up the interior of your car to the best of your ability. This guy has been trained, you know, through his college in forensics, and that is how not to contaminate a scene or how not to take a scene with you. You know, those things are important for safety. You know, if you go into an incident where, you know, the person has some kind of contagious virus or something, and or they have an illness or a disease, hepatitis or something like that, and there's blood, you're not going to want to take that home with you. Right. So they teach you how not to do that. Yeah. And so, you know what I'm saying? So if this guy has this training and knowledge, to me, I mean, it would make more sense, you know, for this guy to not take his own vehicle. I mean, to take his own vehicle and just prepare it to the best of his ability. And he's aware of certain things that could be used to clean it afterwards. And I think that's a high possibility. Thank you, Olivia, for your Fight a Super sticker.
Like one of the theories I always said in the beginning, like if it was my car and I couldn't get another car and I couldn't walk the distance and stuff like that, he didn't even make it a point to try to disguise his car. You know, you can order what do you call it? You can plastic dip it and peel it off, or you can order just the paper that sticks to the car. I can't even remember the name of it. And do some stripes on it, racing stripes on it, just to throw people off, and then just pull them off.
Yeah, but I think there'll be like residue there, right? And there's a way to test. If there was glue recently there.
There is, but they would have to, know that it wasn't peeled off, and you would have to do a nice wash and buff afterwards. And you can get most of it off.
You can get most of it, but if you see this straight edge on the back at one part, it looks like it could have been a racing stripe, and you have information, because you're not just going to say, oh, hey, look, there's that white Elantra. You're going to look for the white Elantra with the racing stripe. And, if you get information that that's the owner, we're like, all right, well, hey, his Elantra doesn't have a racing stripe. Well, he had to have put something there. So let's go and see if we can test for adhesive or whatever the case may be, the material that the spray paint that you're referring to comes with, and see if that was the goal. Now, I don't think that they would be caught solely based on driving their vehicle around town. It would be something that they would have had to have been like, all right, we already know who the guy is. So
I know what it is now. The vinyl wraps that I was thinking of.
Yeah, vinyl wrap. But they have some adhesive. Let me see. Daniel, I appreciate your information. Oh, go ahead.
I said they do, but there's like all these new sprays and chemicals that get all that stuff off.
Yeah. Paula says, I appreciate the information. If the DNA was taken directly from him and matched straight away, then we wouldn't be where we're at with the case. Would you agree? I know we'd be exactly where we were at if they had his DNA right away. Like, they didn't do anything at his DNA. So once they had his DNA is when police started to move forward. Now, we know that because in the state's information referencing the IgG workup and the genetic testing, they stated that the FBI cannot get involved and do that testing to figure out who the DNA belongs to, unless all law enforcement techniques have been exhausted. There's no leads, there's no suspect. So as soon as they got his DNA, which according to the New York Times was December 19th or December 20th, I think it was the 19th, and everything starts after that. December 23rd is when they pull the search warrant on his phone pings. December 27th is when they pull they do the trash pull. December 29th or 28th is when they test it, and it comes back that it is 99.99998% the father of or the son, or that DNA sample that they got in the trash was 99.9% the father of that DNA profile, right? So knowing that suspect profile was the son of that trash pool, who's the son? It's Bryan Kohberger. And then they go and arrest him based off of that, information. They had his dad DNA that basically connected him, and they had his phone pings and his phone activity for that night. Everything happened after that. So if they would have found out, hey, or had any thoughts that it was him right away, they would have done the trash pool right away to test it with the DNA on the sheath. That was found immediately, right? Let's see. Mark says, compare the OJ Simpson scene with the amount of blood found inside the Bronco, and you'll get an idea of what blood can do and can't do with transfer. No, I understand what it can and can't do. the thing is, you also have to realize that Bryan Kohberger wasn't a football player. He was a criminologist with a PhD, going through the PhD program, and he had a master's degree in criminology out of DeSales, where one of the classes taught you how not to contaminate a scene with your DNA and how not to take with you. Christopher Porco, I believe is his name, was a guy who took the life of his father with an axe and hit his mother also with an axe in the head, but she ended up surviving. The father was hit multiple times, including his skull, and there was no sign of cleanup in the house. There was no sign of anybody taking a shower or anything. And this guy who's been convicted ended up driving in his Jeep 3 hours away after committing this crime. And there was nothing found in his Jeep as far as blood or DNA from his parents. There was no sign of cleaning in his Jeep. There was no bleach marks or anything. The thing is, that guy worked at a veterinarian hospital where he was privileged to and had training on assisting with animal surgeries and had the equipment to cover himself so that way during surgery he doesn't get blood on his person. All right, and that's something that you can take off, put in a bag, and hey, there you go. You don't transfer it into your vehicle. So just because there's no DNA there, or how easy it is, I understand that, but we also have to take into consideration the knowledge and the experience and the training of the person that we're talking about. What do you think, Big Blue?
Yeah, I mean, I always remember the saying, the glove does not fit, you must acquit. So that's some famous OG line. But I think he did have access to a lot of PPE, so he wouldn't be able to transfer blood into the car. Right. That stuff is easily removable.
Yeah. Sarge comes in. Do you think, and this is something that you had answered earlier, I wanted to answer this. I don't know if he was or not, but I will say this to you guys. If he did do what he's alleged to have committed, then we know that he was awake at least 2:45 in the morning. He shut his phone off at 2:57. Let's just say he did commit this crime, quadruple homicide, and left that scene at 4:20 and drove all the way around down to Unionton and comes back into Pullman at 5:36, 5:37. He goes home. We know at 9, so let's just say he takes a shower and unwinds and lays down in bed, and he's in bed by 6 o'clock. It's doing it fast, right? We know that he's up and ready to go at 9 because that's when he leaves his apartment to go to Moscow, and that's where he is there between 9 and 9:21. And then he comes back. I think he ends up getting back somewhere around 9:36. And then we know at 11:45 that he's down in Clarkston, Washington, which was about an hour away or so, an hour 45 minutes away. And he's there by 11:45, 12 o'clock. So he must have left around 11. And then he doesn't get back home until 8 o'clock that night. So from 2:40 in the morning to 8 o'clock the next evening, committing a quadruple homicide. I mean, I've been in some crazy situations, and in those scenarios, your adrenaline jumps, and immediately after you're exhausted. So I don't know if he was on something. I don't know, and I don't know how long earlier prior to 2:44 he was awake. I mean, maybe perhaps he slept all day and woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You know, that would make more sense. But if he hadn't, let's just say if he had woken up at 8 o'clock in the morning and then didn't go to sleep until the next night at 8 p.m., committed a quadruple homicide in between there, drove a crap ton of miles across probably some of the most, I don't know, maybe boring landscape. I mean, all there is out there, fields of corn or whatever, fields. What do you think, Blue?
Yeah, I don't know if he was on something or not. And then it's a possibility he had in the past. But I think, you know, to be awake that long, it's possible. There's days I'm awake 24 hours plus, and I still function clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean,
might get...
is it plausible? Is it possible without having to? Yeah, it is. And I don't know, I don't know this guy. So I don't know. Blue, you say you've done something, you've stayed up longer and been functioning. Were you driving for multiple hours throughout the day? And
there's times that I work overnight shift, and I'm up since 2:00, and I drive to Del Rio.
But did you have like
back?
Were you involved in an 8-minute fight?
No.
And so, in between there, there's some more to it. But like I said, I don't know. Maybe perhaps he's the kind of guy that can stay up like that, but I'm not sure. If the YouTube search warrant was for your channel, would they have to tell you? And like the search warrant? Yeah. They would have to tell you because, well, I don't know. I would assume so, but I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Because it's not like it's my personal property. Like, for instance, if it was like I had something in my house, like film or something, or we did interviews in person and we had, people in studio, and I had like raw footage of somebody they're investigating, like DJ Vlad in the Tupac incident, where he investigated, or he interviewed Keefe D, the guy that was just arrested for murder. He interviewed him, and they used a lot of his footage because he basically confessed in his interview, to get the arrest warrant for him. And they had to get a warrant for the raw footage or whatever. And they had to obviously inform him. But this scenario, like a YouTube video, I don't know. I don't think so. But
I
maybe
think they would just have to subpoena YouTube. Probably. Yeah, right. And then YouTube would have to hand over all the videos that are on that channel, and whatever's saved in that channel is like memory bank that ain't posted. But yeah, it depends on where your channel's information comes from.
Right. So, what else do we know about this case? Right. We knew that this guy is pretty intelligent. He's got a PhD, or going for his PhD. He's got a master's. He's got a bachelor's in psychology. So he's not stupid. He's intelligent. If the goal, like I said, is to get away with this, what are some of the clues that are out there? I think the fact that it is believed, and I also believe, that when Bryan Kohberger entered the rear of the residence, that he opened the sliding glass door. And I believe he didn't close the sliding glass door after that. That glass door remained open until police arrived. Now, I know there was a lot of people that were saying that the reports that the front door was open, and even news media ran with that and asked, Chief Fry about that. And he wasn't aware of that. Now, I do know that, I believe it was, I think it was the second day or the third day, there was a interview, or not an interview, there was a conference in which Chief Fry had mentioned that the rear sliding glass door was still open when they arrived. Right. So that tells me if they believe that it's still open when they arrived. And kind of the way he said it kind of indicated to me that it had been open since the incident. Now, I think that there's going to be evidence that's going to show us that he only opened it from the outside, whether that's a disturbance in the dust or whatever on the outside, but nothing like that on the inside of the glass or on the handle. But I think they're going to figure out that it was only open once and it was left open the entire time. Now, why would you do that? Why would you do that, Blue?
Why would I just leave the door open?
The glass door open.
I would leave it open for an easy way out, without having to make lose time to try to reopen it. You know how those glass doors stick sometimes, and it's going to cause you have to do more force. At least from what I remember, those glass doors just stick, and they're harder to open sometimes after you close them.
That's true. They are kind of hard to close, but after you open them.
And I want to say that is a way they find the depth of the knife wounds, is they use MRI or CT scans. They don't use X-rays because X-rays won't tell you.
Right. So when it comes to the rear glass door, the reason why I think he leaves it open is because if he closes it, whether that's immediately after he enters it, he has to reopen it to get out, right? That would mean that he would have to grab the door or the sliding glass door 2 more times to get out, which would leave 2 opportunities for him to leave some sort of DNA behind, right? So he leaves it open the entire time. I suspect he went up to the first floor. I think that maybe perhaps Xana felt the draft, went into the kitchen, saw the glass door open, maybe even heard something upstairs and said out loud, I think someone's here. Returned to her bedroom, where Ethan was still asleep, and she was surprised from behind. And then Dick went towards Ethan, who, even if he was waking up in that moment, probably, isn't like ready to fight anybody. You know what I mean? He's just waking up in that moment, and you have a guy who's pretty big himself. If Kohberger is the person who ended up committing this crime, armed with a very large knife, you're not in the most spot. It's not the most advantageous spot to be in, right? So, a lot of people say that 8 to 10, 11 minutes is too long. How many times, with a shove item, do you think somebody could, just stab something, a pig, in 1 minute?
And I would say it's hard to tell, but over 100.
Yeah, I'm not talking about like a live or anything. I'm talking about like a cow that's hanging in a meat market or whatnot. You'd be able to just boom, like if you were just going as hard as you can, it'd definitely be over 100 times in a minute. If you had the endurance to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when someone says that this amount of time isn't enough, I don't know. I don't think that's the case. At first, you had more questions about guilt. What changed? All right. So the first question that I had about guilt was, we had Howard Bloom come out with the information of the DNA on the knife sheath. He stated that it was a speck, that it was not found by Moscow, Idaho, and that the sheath had to be sent over to Othorn Labs, and they had to use this special technology that's typically used in cold cases to bring up a DNA profile. And all of that was factually incorrect. So we believe what he said. He's an author. He's a journalist. He was somebody that was supposed to be reporting, truth and proven truth, not his opinion or his perception of what, maybe he was told. But yeah, that wasn't, the DNA that they found was enough for Moscow, Idaho to create an STR profile. And so the argument wasn't the amount of DNA anymore. It was now Kohberger's name using this genetic tree. So that kind of, I didn't like that. The next thing was the locations from the phone from FBI Cast. At the time when I read the probable cause affidavit, I wasn't aware of the FBI's tactics and their technology that they had and how accurate those cast locations were. I thought, like everybody else, it was the phone pings, and those have an accuracy that's not very good. So I question, him being in that area, not being in that area, things like that, even up to the point where after the incident in November, in the early mornings of November 13th. And once I was able to review information about the, how accurate that cast information is, that further led me to believe that this guy is more than likely a two-handed. And I had always had a question about him turning his phone off and then turning it on, just coincidentally having it off during the time of the incident. So that's what all sort of changed. And then, just kind of logically thinking about things, right? If this was some sort of like drug type of thing, well, one, who would be involved in this, right? Who do you think, if somebody passes away and it's because of drug involvement, like you're thinking that the person who passes involved in drug activity? Don't you think that, Blue?
Yeah, you would think they owed somebody money, or
well, not necessarily that, but like that if you find somebody who's passed away and and it is believed that the reasoning behind it was drug related, right? You're going to find evidence of that, especially when you go through their phone, right?
Oh yeah.
Now you're a police department, so you can forensically go through the phone. So it's not like, some regular random person saying, "Hey, I know the password," right? Because a lot of stuff that's deleted, a lot of stuff that's all these things, and which is another reason why, like people would say, "Oh, they didn't have to get a warrant for Kaylee's phone because her parents knew her password." Well, what about all the deleted stuff? What about the encrypted stuff? You got to get a warrant for that. So they would have all that. Do you think there would be evidence? What kind of evidence do you think there would be on there?
I mean, if it was, let's just say this is only a theory, right? It's a theory. If it was a drug-related incident, it would be, maybe some threatening messages. If there's a lot of reasons why people are going to go after you with drugs. Either you owe money, you lost some product, you narked, or you're in a relationship with somebody that owes the same or is doing the same. There's some people that are ruthless and they'll come after you.
But you would have evidence, right? You'd have some sort of like conversation of, let's just say that somebody in this house was selling drugs. Well, they would have had to have sold it to somebody. So you think you'd find the conversation where they're talking to somebody about, hey, I want to go skiing in July, right? Come on now. So, hey, this person says skiing in July. I want to buy skis, $40. It doesn't make any sense, right? But hey, what's that about, right? Because that's on their Venmo or something, right? You would see that. They have access to all that. You would have access to even text messages where they're like, hey, I need a pickup, I need a hookup, things of that nature. And a person would say, yeah, this or that. Then you would also have to have information or some sort of contact on there when there's a sign of trouble. It's not like this person's selling dope and, they're doing a great job. And then the drug dealer's like, oh, I just don't like them. They're moving. Unlike, just like everybody else, because it's a sorority house or an off-campus house, there's a lot of turnover. So a lot of people have moved in and out of that house before, and none of them have passed. But for whatever reason, this time the line was drawn and they overstepped. Right. because they're moving. So unless that's not, the incident, or you would think there would be some sort of like, hey, we don't want you to move. You can't move. We need you to stay. Right? There'd be something like that. You don't think police would have seen that?
Yeah, but like I said, I don't think that was in any of these cases.
No, it obviously
if
isn't.
it was, people should be smarter and have like burner phones and stuff like that. But the way the incident happened, they didn't have enough time to hide that, and this, the person took it with.
They caught Rex Humerman on his burner phones, right?
Yeah,
They got video of him buying his burner phone. So yeah, that's not going to protect people in 2022, 23. Buying a burner phone. There's a trail there, a financial one at first, and it just got to be found.
But there's a way around everything. I mean, you just have to know the right people.
Right, but like I'm saying, and there was like this that maybe perhaps Dylan and Bethany were aware that something was going to happen that night, right? That maybe perhaps they thought that they were only getting roughed up, which is why they didn't call 911, but they were scared or whatever, right? My thing is, they did a forensic download on Dylan and Bethany's phone too. So wouldn't there be evidence of them knowing that was going to go down? Wouldn't there be evidence of, them knowing about any type of activity like going on in that house? There would be. And here's how it would happen. I would see, if I was investigating this, I would see that and say, hey, this number here seems suspicious. Let's try to figure out whose number that is. Oh, that comes back to this person. Now, I'm not going to say, hey, because this information would have came very quickly. Very quickly. Yeah. I'm not going to say like, hey, you know what? It'll be easier to go convict a PhD criminologist student. Let me let this drug dealer go, just so I know that I can. It'll be easier to convict this guy instead of dealer that clearly has some threatening text messages or whatever, right? So one, that doesn't make any sense. Two, that would have been found out very quickly. And then you go and you make contact with this person. You try to figure out if they have any means to a white Elantra. All right. You get a warrant for their phone activity. See where they were at that night. And once you find out that, they were or weren't involved, if they were, it'd be an easy arrest. And this guy would have been off the streets in a matter of probably days. Wouldn't take that long. 3 Texan turkeys walk into a bar, find out what happens next. Love it. If you guys want to join, hit that join button. We appreciate it. So thank you, Angel. We appreciate that. Yeah, I took the glasses off because I have an eye issue. I have something like called keratoconus. I can't pronounce it, but it's basically where the cornea cones out, and eventually I could go blind. But I have to wear contacts because if I don't, I can't see anything. And I have contacts on every time I wear the shades. Unfortunately, I kind of scratched my eye. Taking off the contact, it got dry, and it's kind of scratched it, and it was burning. So I haven't been putting on my contacts recently. So I'm just coming out here with my regular glasses. Janet comes in with a $4.99. I'm going with innocent until proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt in the court of law. Hope the trial clears up other DNA specimen. I mean, I get it. I mean, innocent until proven guilty. And yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that somebody should go take Bryan Kohberger out tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? And, I want to hear all the evidence. I'm not saying he's guilty or not guilty. I think he did it, But when it comes to the other DNA that's there, one, it said that it was in the area of where 2 of the bodies were. It doesn't say that it was on the bodies. It wasn't. I'm pretty sure that if it was close to the bodies or on something, their clothing or whatever the case may be, they would have highlighted that, just like they highlighted the fact that there was DNA inside of a glove outside. Right? The fact that they only say that vague, statement that it's a 3 or 2 DNA unidentified DNA profiles in the area where the bodies are located, that leads me to believe it's probably pretty far, but like in the room. It's kind of like when you hear somebody say, "Oh man, this football player is top 7 in the country." Well, he's 7, right? Why would you say top 7 if he was 3? You get what I mean? So you're going to come as close to or as big as possible to create the most reasonable doubt. And if the closest thing that somebody comes is, in the area, that tells me it was probably a little bit further than that they're eluding people to want to think. And then you have the question: if you have 2 unidentified DNA samples, on a dresser in the room, and you have 1 identified DNA sample on a knife sheath where you have them whose lives were taken by what at the time they suspect was a sharp force object, I think you're going to prioritize the DNA on the sheath, right? And go along through there. But it says party house, you'd expect tons of DNA. Why just 2 noted is odd? It was saying that there was 2 unidentified. That doesn't mean that there weren't others that weren't identified. And it was only referencing the areas where 1 of the bodies or 2 of the bodies were found. It wasn't referencing the entire house. So, yeah, there was probably tons of DNA in that house.
Yeah, from all the parties in here too, all the door handles on the outside and stuff like that would have had a bunch from the party from the night before.
Dinky says, so you can say use drugs, but nobody else. 1, I never said that Bryan did use drugs. I just put out an outline of the events that we know of when he came to what he was doing that night. If you think that, he was on drugs because that's a logical explanation to have committed all this and do all this at that time for that long of a time period, that's your conclusion. I'm not saying that at all. And I never said that nobody else used drugs. Recreational drugs in a college town, I think we would be naive to think that that's not happening. But to say that, it was some sort of major operation that required something to this extent, and it'd be unknown, and it'd be like a cartel or something big, if somebody was going to do that in the drug like cartel or hits, it's usually a message. There was a cartel hit, an actual cartel hit in Northern California, I believe, not too long ago. Not very far from, Washington State. And apparently 4 people were executed. Law enforcement knew right away it was cartel related, and they put it out there. Like, I don't understand why people think that the police department would look at something like this, and if they had any suspicion that it was drug related or had some sort of drug angle, why they would put on the back burner in efforts to go find some innocent person, frame an innocent guy, or look at Bryan Kohberger, who was a PhD student in the nearby university. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we still got to remember there's 4, parents and families out there that lost 4 children, and it's a sad story all around. But it's getting close to the time. I got to jump off here in a minute. Like Diana jumped off. I'll wait for him to come back on. Let's see what other question we have out here. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get a good question out. Most of these are just y'all talking to each other.
Sorry about that. What happened? My internet just kind of blinked.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up another question and answer, but they're mostly either to you or they're just talking to each other in the chat. So.
Yeah. Let me see. We'll probably do maybe 5 more minutes or so, and then we'll call it a show. How did BK leave a tiny, bit of DNA on the knife sheath, but no DNA found anywhere else? Well, I think he was wearing more than gloves. I think he had maybe perhaps coveralls, things like that. I don't think he intended on leaving the sheath behind. I think he may have, handled the sheath, maybe even handled the knife with his hands as some sort of weird thing, and had no intention on leaving it behind. So he could have cleaned it, he could have wiped it down, cleaned the blade, but it's described that the sheath was inside the button. So it might be a hard place to clean. Let's see. 1014 WSU trap stop. Forgot that one. 1217 perf plane. Progressing, not perfect. 12-8 wide launch release. I think that was in the 7th. 12-9 second altercation. That's true. 12-11 meeting for and 12-15 two traffic stops. 12-19 fired. Yeah, this is a pretty good timeline about the incident or the timeline. I think there was also a meeting in November before the incident had occurred, where there was a behavioral plan for Bryan Kohberger at WSU, and they met in December and basically said that he's progressing but not perfect, and then he got into that altercation. Yeah. That's possible. See, because we also have to remember that information that's coming out, whether it's from the prosecution or the defense, is going to be very much one-sided. All right, the defense is going to look at things from a defense, perspective, and the prosecution as well. It's kind of like that saying, everything to a hammer is a nail. So, like, I've put out one piece of information, right, and in the same video, the same small amount of information, I've been accused of being a Bryan Kohberger apologist or being a Bryan Kohberger hater. And so the reason being is the perspective of the viewer. If they're automatically thinking that the information is a lie or it's negative or whatever the case may be, they're going to assume that it's negative and towards their direction. And it doesn't even have to be me. Like, for instance, I've seen some of these warrants that came out, and I've seen creators who think that Bryan Kohberger committed this crime, and they're looking at that same information and saying, oh man, this is good for the defense. And then I've seen other creators who are looking at the same evidence and content and saying this is good for the prosecution. So it's all about perspective, in my opinion. It was jealousy. So the problem with the jealousy thing is that typically when somebody's upset and it's an emotional crime like that, it's not very well planned out. It's not very well executed. It's something that usually happens in the moment. Crime of passion, stuff like that. Even if it's Bryan Kohberger who was jealous of these for a reason, I mean, maybe, but I don't know if that's going to be the motive in this case. I think that given the fact that I don't think he took any trophies, I don't think he took any pictures, anything like that. I think he took the knife with him because he couldn't leave it behind, but I don't think he has it in his possession anymore. And doing all those type of things, getting rid of everything, like I think he got rid of everything. Tells me that either he's disciplined, right, and he can overcome his temptation, and he couldn't, control whatever fantasy he had to have committed this crime, right? So we were, lead to believe that he have the willpower to not take souvenirs. So the fact that there's none of those there, to our knowledge, and leaving the back sliding glass door open possibly, and the other thing is not, Dylan. He didn't attack Dylan. One of the reasons why I don't think he attacked Dylan was because the location of her bedroom. Her bedroom was right there next to the staircase and right in front of where you walk in and out of the kitchen. There was another door next to it. I would have assumed that one was a closet and one was a pantry. Now, if your intent is to touch things as little as possible, right? Why would you open up a closet or pantry door? So I think that's the main reason. And we had a guy that I interviewed who's been in that house, who's a University of Idaho frat student. And he told me that it took them a long time to know that the door, which was Dylan's door, was a bedroom, that they had been there so many times and they always thought it was a closet, like him and his buddies. In fact, I don't think until this crime occurred that they realized that was a bedroom. And he'd been there a couple of times. So, somebody there at night walking through there who maybe had been there once if he went to a party or not, but walking through there at night, not trying to touch things as little as possible. I think there's a chance that he didn't touch that door because he thought it was a closet. Jeff says, Daniel, what do you think about my crazy theory that bloody on Bryan ended up in a shower curtain wrapped up and put in his trunk? I think everything bloody did end up in some sort of plastic container, whether it was a shower curtain or a large plastic bag, and ended up in his trunk that way. I don't necessarily think it's the shower curtain, just because the incident occurred November 13th, and he left his house December 13th in the morning, I think it was, or the 14th, with his father. So he would have been a month without the shower curtain. So I suspect that the shower curtain was probably not involved. Because of that, I think it was just probably taken down or taken or thrown out for cleanliness. What do you think, Blue?
Yeah, I think if he would have had it in his car, they would have found maybe like soap scum or something. Because shower curtains get a lot of soap scum and DNA. It would be too much. They would find some of that in the trunk if it was in the trunk. I think he probably did throw it in the bag. It's easier just to get a plastic bag, put it all in there, and discard it later. But I don't know, man. Like this case is still interesting. It's still interesting. There's a lot of stuff we don't know yet. I wonder if he'll ever answer what he did with it. He'll probably say he just threw it away because he was leaving and he didn't want bacteria to grow, and probably was going to get a new one when he came back.
That's what I think too.
He's also like he's trying to wear gloves and be over. I think he he's a clean. What do you call him? Is it like
clean? Yeah, OCD.
Yeah.
So Dinky's. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And for some, leaving that over the time, scum like growing into bacteria, they wouldn't want it, so they just throw it away.
All right.
But I gotta get going.
Dinky said,
I gotta work tonight. Yeah.
All right, Blue. I'm gonna answer this one. I'll probably answer maybe a couple of more, and then call it a night as well. Dinky says, I thought he knew the layout. Well, maybe. I mean, he was in the area 12 times. It doesn't necessarily say that he was inside the house 12 times, right? So also at the time of the incident, I tried to find the layout of the house. The only thing that I could find was like Zillow and Apartment Now, an apartment complex. And they had pictures of the interior of the house, but didn't really have the layout. And it didn't have those pictures in any particular order. So if he'd never gone into that house, and the only thing that he could observe from the outside is maybe perhaps the second story windows and seeing the traffic going in and out of there, based on the parking views that he could have had, right? Because the rear sliding glass door wasn't facing the apartment complex or the park. It was kind of facing towards the other house. That was, I think, like 11, 12 King Road. It was kind of facing that direction. So if he was, if he was on the opposite side of the house, he wouldn't be able to see in there. To see that there was a door there, and that's a bedroom. And like I said, online, there wasn't a layout. So there's a high possibility he didn't know about that door or the exact layout of the house, which is another why I think that he let Dylan live and why he didn't attack Bethany. I do think that the rumor that Dylan yelled out something because she thought that it was party goers, and that she yelled out like to be quiet or something. I do think that happened. And I think that Bryan Kohberger, one, he hadn't even searched or gone down to the first floor. So he may not even have known where it was coming from. Things of that nature. So he knew how far away the police department was from the house. In fact, the white Elantra is seen behind it, at 326. And so I think that he knew he had to get out of there. That's the reason why he spared Dylan's life. One, he didn't know where she was at. And two, he didn't have enough time to continue. If she had called 911, then he would have known that cops would have been there fairly quick. He had no idea they wasn't going to call until noon. You know what I'm saying? There's no way he would have known that. And he may have been in a bit of like tunnel vision, not ready to hear somebody else. So it's kind of like anybody who says something to you, to a person or to yourself, and they don't acknowledge who you are. They just say, and just ask you. There's a good chance you're probably gonna be like, wait, what? What was the first part? Because your attention wasn't grasped. Sorry about that. I'm getting dry. And so I think that's probably what happened that night, but I'm not sure. Obviously, I've been leaning more in favor of the defense. They seem to be able to make sense of how much does that make sense. I understand what you're saying. I don't understand how the defense makes sense. They're saying that Bryan Kohberger's alibi was that he was driving by himself that night. It took him how long to come up with it? His study was in criminology. His text message to his buddies was that he wanted to be a detective that solved high-profile crimes. He wanted to help law enforcement. So, if you knew you were out that night in a vehicle and all you were doing was just driving around, and on December 7th, and law enforcement's looking for a vehicle that matches yours, even though it's not the same year, but that your vehicle looks pretty close to it, you don't come forward, you don't explain yourself to law enforcement when they come and talk to you. They don't really come and talk to them. They arrest them, right? But, and him getting a lawyer, I mean, that's not an indication of guilt. If I had a family member or a friend who got in trouble with the law or whatever, my advice to them, would always be like, be quiet and ask for a lawyer. So, he's aware of that. So I'm not going to say that that's an indication of guilt. But, I just feel that there's some things that don't make sense that would have to be wild for it to not be Bryan Kohberger. Like, for instance, he would have to have 3 law enforcement agencies have this complete vendetta against him, which would be the Moscow Police Department, the Idaho State Police Department, and the FBI, to have framed him and be in cahoots with each other, right? So that's the first thing that would have to happen in order to plant his DNA, because that's the defense's story, that the DNA was planted, right? So, you'd have to believe that. You would also have to know that these law enforcement officers would have known that this crime was going to be committed, and that Bryan Kohberger would have this off during that time and be driving around by himself. Okay. Now, let's just say his DNA wasn't planted there and they say, oh, it was transferred there. So we have to believe that he touched this knife at a garage sale. It just so happened that the real person that committed this crime went and bought that knife afterward, right? And it was just by happenstance that Bryan Kohberger was driving around that night by himself with his phone off during that time that crime was committed. And it just so happens that that person also drives a white vehicle, four-door sedan without a front license plate. All right. I mean, I just don't understand how the defense makes more sense. Because to me, any defense that comes up when it comes to Bryan Kohberger trying to explain those things, they're way unbelievable. Yeah, watching from the back, you would see that that's still in his bedroom, but you're also assuming that he knows that door is leading to that bedroom when he's walking from the sliding glass door that has no visual, right? You have no idea where that front door is that goes into that bedroom. So you're gonna think, oh, hey, this door right here is the one. No, I'm sorry, that's not accurate. Those places rented out or on Zillow, yeah, they would have pictures, but those pictures there only have they don't even have the pictures of the bed in order. They just show pictures of the bedrooms, and I haven't seen one that has like a map or a layout. I couldn't find one when I was looking for this. When I was looking for the layout of the house and stuff immediately after the murders had occurred. Yeah, but I mean, you're on 12 times from outside of the house. I mean, unless you have X-ray vision and you can see, where they're walking through. The information that you're going to be able to gather from watching outside of the house is limited. You're able to see the traffic coming in and out. You might be able to see when lights turn off, when lights turn on, the activity that's going on, things of that nature. But, what people are doing inside, unless you have a view of the window, I don't know. No, I don't think he took their IDs. I think that would have been a big piece of evidence that, how can I put that? We got word that IDs were picked up from his parents' house, right? So I think that it would have been out that there were the victim's IDs, and I think it's already been proven that it wasn't. DNA on scene is explained how now? Well, his DNA on the sheath, I mean, he touched it. Like, that was the one thing that I told everybody. I was like, what's the most common way to get touch or transfer DNA on something is by touching it. So if Bryan Kohberger touched the button sheath, that's how he got his DNA on it. Now, is there other explanations? Yeah, there could be. But you also have more than just the DNA. You have the description that Dylan said. Now, before everybody goes, oh, that description, she was drunk, she was asleep, she may have been on drugs, whatever the case may be, right? But her description, as vague as it is, doesn't exclude Kohberger, right? Now, Dylan said that she saw a Hispanic male that was dark complected. Oh, that's clearly not Kohberger. Or she said that she saw, a 5'5", 240-pound man. Well, that's not Kohberger. That excludes him. Now, the description doesn't necessarily say it is him, but it doesn't exclude him. Then you also have the white car without a front license plate. There's a lot of white cars out there. So it doesn't necessarily say that it's him, but it doesn't exclude him. But you also have him admitting that he was driving around that night without with nobody for a long period of time, right? And then you have his phone turning off during the time that the crime was committed. So it's not just the DNA, it's not just the phone pings, it's not just the white car or the description. It's all of those put together. The story that has to come up to explain all that is unbelievable, in my opinion. I challenge anybody to come up with a story explaining all of those scenarios that's logical and believable. It's not going to happen. That's why they're not coming out with something that's logical and believable. That's why the defense is questioning, the validity of certain things. They're questioning things that have never been before, that aren't even brought into the case, right? They're questioning the IGG thing, the workup, right, on Bryan Kohberger. They want to know, the victims and all, not the victims. They want to know, the relatives that pointed in his direction. They want the work, right? But here's the thing. The prosecution doesn't plan on using that information. So let's just say that the state says, all right, Ann Taylor, we're going to force the state to give you those workups. And let's just say the state goes to the FBI and the FBI says, here you go. Here's the workup. We redid it. We did everything so that you can see our work. They find something wrong. They mishandled something, chain of evidence, whatever. So now the defense is going to say, hey, right here, it was done wrong. I want to have this evidence thrown out of court. So then the judge is going to say, all right, we're throwing out the IGG workup on Bryan Kohberger. It doesn't change the fact that they have the STR profile that matched directly to him when they arrested him. And they had a warrant that had nothing to do with the IGG web to get that warrant, to test him for it. So you're literally asking something to be put in so then you can have it thrown out. That's a strong defense. That's what's called throwing mud on the wall and hope sticks. My betting man, I bet on this if somebody wanted me to. How do you explain the lack of DNA in his own vehicle? Could he have driven someone there to commit the crime? No, I just think that he has training in forensics. I kind of went through this before, but he has training in forensics. He had he got a master's degree in criminology and DeSales. And when I looked up their program, there's a course in forensics. And one of the main things that you're taught in forensics is how not to get your DNA left at the scene and how not to take with you or the DNA with you as well. It's a safety issue. If there's for instance, somebody has a contagious virus or something and there's a lot of blood or whatnot, you don't want to take that into your house or stuff like that, because if you end up having an open wound or whatnot and you come in contact with something that's contagious, it could, not with the most an outcome that would, the person would want, right? So it's a safety issue. You don't want to take the same with you. And those things are taught. There's the Chris Porco case where, and I mentioned this before, he hit his dad in the head with an axe and hit his dad multiple times, and then hit his mom as well while they were sleeping. Now the mom ended up surviving, but the father didn't. This guy ended up getting prosecuted, and what ended up happening was there was no sign. And thank you for the $5 super chat. I appreciate it. There was no sign of cleanup at the house, which means that there wasn't the sign that he took a shower or anything like that. And there was no sign of cleanup in his vehicle, and they found no DNA on his person, in his dorm room, in his school, and he drove back 3 hours to his dorm. And so just because there's no DNA in there doesn't mean that it's not possible that somebody can do that. And with that case, Porco was a vet tech in a veterinarian hospital where they did surgeries on animals, and he had access to and was trained in those surgeries, so he had access to equipment. That way he wouldn't get blood on him from when they're conducting their surgery. And it's believed that that's what he had worn during the commission of the crime, and then took it off prior to entering his Jeep and making a 3-hour drive back home, or back to his dorm. And so because of special training and special knowledge is how you can explain that. And Bryan Kohberger had those things. Let me see. I'm just going to see if there's any more supers that I didn't miss. I want to make sure I grab all those before I call it a show. We just have one more. The Richard comes in with a $1.99 super sticker. I appreciate that. Oh yeah, I need them. Well, here's the thing. I like to use my contacts a lot. I go jogging quite a bit, and I sweat a lot. You know, when it gets on my glasses, they start falling off, and then I start sweating on the lenses, and I can't see. So I wear contacts a lot. I'm not used to wearing glasses, and I was only wearing the sunglasses also because there's a lot of lights on, and with keratoconus, you're a little bit sensitive to light as well. I'm just gonna leave this there. Yeah, I think became know exactly where Dylan was. Furthermore, I think DM knew exactly where PK was, in my opinion. I'm not sure. I don't know what you mean. Iron Range Cube, $1,000. Did it or you didn't do it? Are you talking to me? So times in 4 months could seriously be going to the grocery store in Moscow. But here's the thing: they used CAST. The FBI used the FBI CAST system was the one that used his historical data. It wasn't triangulation. Triangulation is apparently an older technology that's not really up to date anymore. They use something else, and they're able to pinpoint somebody's location to a couple of feet. So he wasn't just going grocery, in Moscow. If they believe that he was in an area watching the house, then they probably have him pretty close. Why do you think that Bryan Kohberger knew where Dylan was, or that? I'm assuming you think that Bryan Kohberger knew that was Dylan's bed. What makes you think that? This is true. It's not. It very much is. It really is. This isn't the first case that something like that happens. And you also have to understand that if you take the sheath out of it and you take Bryan Kohberger out of it, and to say that it is impossible not to leave DNA, well, if it's not Bryan Kohberger, not his DNA on the sheath, then somebody did it. Somebody committed this homicide of 4 people, and somebody didn't leave their DNA behind. Not on the bodies, not under the fingernails, not in the, no hair was left behind. Right. So somebody did it. Now, with that in mind, who could have done that? Who could have been smart enough, experienced enough, had the training enough to not leave their DNA behind? Would a drug dealer have that type of knowledge? I'm not sure. Well, what about What about a love-struck ex-boyfriend who is in the moment of his emotions because his girlfriend is leaving to Texas and dating other guys, and he can't handle it to the point where he takes out 3 others just to get to one? Does that sound like a scenario that's going to end up with no DNA behind? I don't think so. So how about the guy that knows about forensics, knows about how not to, knows about what attire to wear so that way you don't get DNA on you or you don't leave your DNA behind? Because one of the duties of somebody that's investigating something or even collecting things, like a low-level police officer goes to a crime, burglary, and there's blood, at a broken window, they get the swab, they collect it themselves. It's not a murder, it's not anything like that. It's a smaller crime, so it can be processed by that officer. He still needs to be trained, and he understands all those things. He goes through the same training. It may not be as extensive as probably what Bryan Kohberger went through, which would only indicate that I think he would be the one that would most likely commit this crime. Then, or somebody put, well, maybe a police officer. They would also have knowledge of this, and I agree that a police officer would. But you also have 3 agencies involved, so we would be forced to believe that the Moscow Police Department was covering up for one of their officers, and that the Idaho State Police Department was like, hey, we're going to risk our reputation, our jobs, our freedom, because if they get caught, they're going to jail for this crooked cop in Moscow. The FBI is going to do that too for this crooked cop in Moscow. Yeah, that's not adding up. Daniel, the DNA could get thrown out. If it is, I don't think it is. For one, there's no chance it's getting thrown out, to be honest with you. But even if the DNA is thrown out, that doesn't mean Kohberger didn't do it. That just means that there's a technicality of some kind. And at this venture, if you think that that's the only way that Bryan Kohberger could be considered innocent is because of a technicality, then that's kind of saying that you're hoping that a guilty person goes free because of a technicality. I don't know if I want to be on that side of the fence. But the defense said they'd been provided with none of the DNA from the apartment, the house, the car. Then the state hadn't provided it. No. They said that there was no evidence of DNA in the house, apartment, or car. So they did say those things. If it was there, they would have provided it by now. In fact, they had said that they had provided everything multiple times. So no, they are in fact saying that there is no DNA from the victims on Kohberger's house, person, vehicle. That's the claim from the defense. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's true. I mean, I would assume it would be, because it is a court document, and the lawyers can get in trouble for putting out stuff like that it's not true, if it's not true. A dog scholar can tell me where he is within 6 feet. Yeah, exactly. So to think that law enforcement and current technology don't have equipment that's going to be pretty precise, it's just not logical. It's just not logical. Daniel, they reviewed the tip from WSU on November 29. Plenty of time to get his DNA or speak with him, but they didn't. I'm sure you're going to come up with excuses, though, for why. They didn't receive a tip. They were told that there was a white Elantra for Bryan Kohberger in this area. Now, I'm pretty sure that there's a warrant that's out there for the Moscow Idaho State Lab that's going to tell us that they, in fact, had the DNA created well before this incident, that they had the profile created well before the November 29th incident. And according to the DOJ, the FBI cannot do that genetic tree unless there's no suspects. And according to the New York Times, the FBI came up with the name Bryan Kohberger because of the genetic tree, not because of some WSU police officer finding a white Elantra and putting that in. Remember, there was like 9,000 tips, 10,000 tips. So just because it's in there and they were aware of it doesn't mean that that's why they caught on to him. But they find out who he is December 19th. Now, in the Howard Bloom article, he puts on there that on December 19th, that Moscow Police Department chief was pretty excited about a white Elantra in Eugene, Oregon. Now, if they got his name that day, December 19th, and they went to Bryan Kohberger's house and there's no white Elantra, there's nobody there because 3 days earlier he left to the Poconos, right? And so if they were watching him then, if they knew it was him, they would have known that he was in the Poconos and not the Eugene, Oregon car, right? And then they had to, and it states this in the probable cause affidavit, that they had to locate him by finding out that there was a Colorado license detector that took a picture of his license plate and showed that he was in Colorado on the specific day. And then they found out that Indiana had pulled him over twice. Now, before anybody says, oh, man, that was planted, that was plotted by the FBI, if you go watch the dinner of the officers that pulled over Kohberger, both of them are leaning over and just kind of hanging out, putting their hands inside the car. That's not the way an officer approaches a possible quadruple homicide suspect who is unaware of why you're pulling them over, right? To that suspect, you could be pulling them over to arrest them for that homicide, right? Now, that's what the officer has to go and think of when they're approaching that vehicle. Whether that person committed the crime or not, they were suspect in a quadruple homicide. You have to handle that with care. You don't go in there and handle with your hands inside of the car's door frame and just kind of hang out and talk to the guy. So no, I don't think that police told or FBI told local law enforcement there in Indiana to pull this guy over, get a look at his hands, all this other crap, because there's no way that happened. That's an officer safety issue. And if, for instance, the FBI didn't say anything, oh man, there would be some hell to be raised because you're putting officers in a very bad situation where they're approaching a quadruple homicide suspect who is fleeing possibly. You know, he's in Indiana. You don't know what can happen in those situations. So you're not going to go in there and just hang out. And so you look at when they started to investigate Kohberger, but when did they pull the warrant for the phone records? December 23rd. When did they pull the trash? December 27th. Now, those two things right there were things that could have been pulled December 1st. They could have gone to Kohberger's house and pulled his DNA, right? They could have gone to Kohberger's house and watched him and pulled it there. But they didn't. They waited till December 27th and they pulled it out of his parents' house. They arrest him, December 30th. Everything happens after December 19th. So, yeah, I strongly suspect that that genetic tree was completed on December 19th and everything went on that way. It's kind of like Richard Allen, right? He went out there, he put a tip that he was out there on the damn trail. They knew about it. The law enforcement knew about it. Somebody did, at least. They didn't investigate him. They didn't go through with it. They didn't think that he was the guy. They're suspects in mind. So just because they were aware Bryan Kohberger, November 29th, doesn't necessarily mean that he was a suspect. Let's see. This one makes me laugh. Unknown DNA leads to drug dealers. And there's no evidence of drug dealer connection between the victim's phones or the roommate's phones when they were forensically gone through by law enforcement. And if there was, law enforcement said, nah, we're going to let these drug dealers go and go arrest and charge this PhD criminology student. Yeah, that's logical. Forensics death examiner you had a while back did an excellent job explaining this. Thank you so much. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. That's another reason why, like, my thoughts about the question marks in Bryan Kohberger's case started to go down. You know, I got to speak to an expert in forensics and get their opinion on not just the evidence, but the possibility of somebody with knowledge of forensics and how they could potentially get away with a crime like this. But yeah, no way it's getting thrown out. No way he's, any of those things are going to happen. I don't know how many times I've heard other creators say, you know, Bryan Kohberger is going to be out by Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. We're going to hear something, and nothing happens. Nothing happens, just emotions that happened during pretrial. This is going to go forward. Bryan Kohberger is going to have his day in court, and the evidence is going to be displayed. And at that time, and only at that time, are we, the viewers, the folks that create content, those that consume the content, are going to find out, you know, what is all the evidence that they have against him. You know, the defense's real strategy going to be in that moment, and we're going to be able to then make a determination: is this guy guilty? Is this guy innocent? He's going to be judged by peers, 12 peers, and we'll find out then, you know. But until then, there's no reason for anybody to get all upset or hurt or any of those things just because somebody else might have a different opinion. Let's all be reasonable and logical and grown-ass adults. All right? That's what we are at the end of the day. There's no need to call names or any of those things. So we'll be back on Friday. Jaime will be back. Big Blue will be back. I'll be back. Until then, we'll see you next time. Peace out.